أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. We start in the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful, and we bear witness there is no deity worthy worship except Allah, praise and glory be to Him, and that Muhammad is a seal of messengers. He was sent as a mercy to all mankind. May peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, his family, his companions, and those who followed his path until the day of judgment. I greet you with greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome back. This is Dr. Abdul Aziz, your host on this A2Z show. After a break, and the break was as I deserved from my host, my guest as well, Brother Asad Zaman. So we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Yes, I'm afraid I've been down with COVID.
Yes, okay, I think that may last, but you are better now, alhamdulillah. And inshallah, we hope, inshallah, everybody is okay. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. And those who are ill, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them a quick recovery as well. And of course, we have lost some brothers and sisters as well. So therefore, we go and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower their souls with His forgiveness and pardon, give them the highest firdaus in paradise, and of course make their grave as a garden from the gardens of paradise as well, and give their families and their friends as well and relatives patience and great reward.
Amen.
And of course we pass our condolences and thoughts as well for the family and the relatives of those 5 people who have been killed or murdered in the south, in Plymouth. Yeah, and of course it's a very, very uncommon that is happening, and of course we might have, if we have time, we can talk about it.
Well, that's a new form of terrorism, by the way, that they are discovering.
Yeah, because of course.
You've got a group, a growing, it seems, group of men who feels totally rejected by women, and they feel that they've got such a hatred for women that they feel, why are these women not attracted to us? Right, there's something wrong with these women, and they feel, they have a very, very negative attitude, and those who are on the extreme, they end up killing them.
All right, and they said, of course, the person had the license. The license was taken in December and then given back to the person. Yeah. And of course, the leader of the Labour Party said, to start with, why he needs a gun, why he has to have a gun. And of course, now
anyway,
there's an story. Right, that's on the national, I think, this one. I think you have been off, I think, for Friday prayers, and of course, I attended one in Didsbury Mosque when the Khatib spoke about what does it mean to send peace and blessings and prayers upon the Prophet, peace be upon him, and that the Allah, inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabiy ayyuhalladhina sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Therefore, Allah and His angels and we as well, we join in to send peace and blessing upon the Prophet ﷺ. And he said that the more people send peace and blessing upon me, they will be getting closer to me as well. And everyone who sends peace and blessing upon me once, I send peace upon him 10 times as well. So therefore, he was speaking about, and I had a chat with some young people because he spoke in Arabic and then in English. And of course, the youngsters, they understood what was the topic about. And it was a very good, of course, there's less restriction about that. Okay, we'll be talking about, there was a protest outside, but inshallah, we might talk about later about it as well. But yeah. I think we have, I think, on the world news as well, this Afghanistan coming back again. And I believe that's
the main one. That's the main news.
And the other one is about the Independence Day of Pakistan as well.
Yes,
therefore, therefore, that's another things which we might talk about. And I think because they are in the same region as well, we will talk about. And maybe if the role of USA and UK is finished there, does Turkey, do you see Turkey having a role to play for the
Inshallah.
transition period between now and the new election and everything, as they are reaching Kabul as well? Okay, so therefore, let's start, I think, the Afghanistan. Just give us this, what we call a tour d'horizon, just a summary from since when it has started. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, we can go back a few hundred years, but we don't have time for that.
No.
So let's very briefly look at just over 100 years ago. The British, when they were the empire on which the sun did not set, because it was such a huge empire, they decided to conquer Afghanistan. They conquered every other territory that they wanted to. And then they said, right, Afghanistan is left. And of course, Afghanistan is probably the most beautiful country in the world. According to John Simpson, the very famous veteran BBC reporter. I mean, he's been all over the world. And I heard this from his mouth. Afghanistan is, in his view, the most beautiful country in the world. So they, British, they decided in about around the end of the 19th century that they were going to attack Afghanistan. They were a superpower, etc. And they launched 3 major wars, and they lost all 3 of them. And then they finally decided Afghanistan is not for us. We cannot defeat Afghanistan. And even though they were such a huge, superpower at the time, massive empire, they were unable to defeat Afghanistan. In 3 major wars they launched against Afghanistan. They lost well over 20,000 men, etc. So then along come let's fast forward a few years and we come to 1979. I mean, there's a lot that went on between, but we haven't got time. 1979, the Russians, as part of the Soviet Union, they decided, okay, we're going to take over Afghanistan. They put a puppet communist regime in there, and who wanted to basically make the whole of Afghanistan communist, because Afghanistan is a Muslim country. And the majority of Afghans are very strong in terms of their deen. 70% are Pashtun Pathans. They know a thing or two about fighting. They don't understand the concept of surrender or the concept of fear. So it's always a bad idea to try and invade Afghanistan, because they will never give up until they've expelled you. And that's what happened to the Russians. They went in big time, 120, 140,000 troops with the latest weaponry and tanks and planes and killer helicopters and everything that they had, every single, basically whatever weapons the Americans have got, the Russians also had. And for 10 solid years, I mean, they killed about over 1 million Afghans. That's the reality. That's about, I don't know, over 300 every single day for 10 years. But they didn't give up. They threw chemical weapons. They threw, everything apart from a nuclear bomb, basically. Even, weapons, bombs that suck out the air from over 100 meters around you and suffocate you to death. Barrack bombs and stuff like that. Every bomb, even bombs that they drop from 30,000 feet that will go right deep into the ground, about 100 meters, and then they explode and they create an earthquake, literally an earthquake. So everything they had, they threw at them. And at the end of it, they realized they could not beat the Afghans. The more they attacked them, the more the they were referred to as the Mujahideen, they hit them back even harder. So after 10 years, they've slaughtered, they had thousands of course, their own troops dead, and they were basically on the verge of bankruptcy. In fact, when they left, the Soviet Union had been destroyed. Afghanistan, and this is I think it was Gorbachev who said, Afghanistan destroyed the Soviet Union. It completely bled the Soviet Union dry, and it just could not sustain the Soviet Union anymore. And that's why in 1989, the communist parties of the various parts of the Soviet Union started collapsing. And then in 91, the Russian Communist Party collapsed, and that was the end of communism. So yeah, Afghanistan destroyed the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, what happened was in 1989, when the Russians finally decided, like the Americans have now, that this is just a total waste of time here. We can never ever win, no matter how big a superpower we are. They left, they were defeated, and they left with their tails between their legs, and basically said, never again. So unfortunately, what happened was in 1989, when the Russians left, then Afghanistan, the various different factions, they started fighting each other. And then the Northern Alliance, which are kind of very on the secular side of things, Tajiks, Uzbeks, and you had these warlords like Dostum, who's basically a communist, whiskey drinking guy, no association with Islam to speak of, but hardcore communist. He was one of the major players, and for about a good few years, 5-6 years, from 89 till about 96, maybe more than 6 years, Afghanistan was in chaos. It was just, factions just killing each other. Maybe essentially a civil war. The good guys against the bad guys, basically. And the result was that about 50,000 people actually died over that period. And no woman was safe outside the house. There was massive rape of women going on during that period. There was just no law at all. I mean, it was just total lawlessness, killings, as well as rape and what have you. So there's no security for anybody, not men, not women. And then when Mullah Umar in 96, he was actually just a madrasa teacher. That's all he was, a simple madrasa teacher. And he owned some of his own, two of his own students. A few students died as a result of the chaos. And so he felt he had to do something. And so what he did was he got his students together, his tulab, hence Talib. You see, this is where the Taliban comes from. So he got his students together and said, right, we have to now fight back against all this lawlessness. I mean, there was mass slaughter of people. I said 50,000 in about six years or so, or thereabouts. And no woman is safe outside the house. I mean, there was so much rape going on. And so he decided to get his students together. And the result was that they formed a group that they called basically students. I mean, I suppose if they knew their Arabic properly, I suppose they'd call them Tullab, not Taliban. Taliban means student, right? Talib is one student, Taliban is two students, and Tullab is plural. But maybe it was a kind of Afghan or version of
dialects. Yes.
Yeah, so that's why they called them Taliban.
Yeah,
students. So they formed a movement to fight back against all this lawlessness, and then in a fairly short time, more and more young people started joining him, and then they became so strong that after a while, they completely, with an iron fist, brought an end to all the killing. and the insecurity. And basically brought peace to Afghanistan. I mean, it was just incredible.
It took them about is it about 5 years it took them?
No, it took them a lot less than that, because in 96 they came into power. Okay. In 1996 they came into power, and then they ruled until 2001. Now, during that time, some pretty incredible things happened, which most people don't know about. Of course, the West was completely against them. And I'll tell you why they were. See, when they came into power, obviously, these are just ordinary people. They're not intellectuals. They're not, they don't know anything about government. They don't know anything. Mullah Omar was just a madrasa teacher. Imagine that. And these were just ordinary students. Because
they, according to this, actually, the rate of literacy, even in 2018, about 43%. Therefore, I think
Afghanistan has always suffered from literacy, a problem of literacy. They just, the government, 48% or whatever is massive. In the 60s, let me tell you what the situation in the 60s was. It was so bad in the 60s in terms of literacy that if anyone could read or write in Afghanistan, they were given a government job. Just read and write, never mind any qualifications. It was that bad in Afghanistan. So yeah, it's a mostly illiterate nation, unfortunately. Emotionally very strong in their deen.
Of course, most of the money was spent on wars and weapons and killing everything. Of course, it doesn't want to education.
Anyhow, so what happened is that they brought an end to all the killing. They brought complete peace to Afghanistan, and this is acknowledged. With an iron fist. Yeah, they were tough, and they brought some strong laws in, and put restrictions on movements of people, like women can only go out in burqas, and they can only go out if they're with a mahram, etc. Because of the lawlessness that was there. People don't see, the Western media won't ever tell you why they did things. They just tell you they did these, and look how barbaric and how backward they are. There's something else they did. You see, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan in '79, they took thousands, about 30,000 children from Afghanistan to Russia to educate them. And they were there, and so they educated them. Of course, this is atheist communism. So they made them, they made them teachers and engineers and what have you. Yeah, up to university level. Yeah. Because they had a long-term plan to make Afghanistan a communist atheist country. So what do? All the elite, they're atheists. Then the rest of the people will become atheists.
Is it maybe China is doing the same with the Uyghurs, isn't it?
Well, exactly. They're trying to rip Islam out completely. So this is what the Russians did. They took basically kidnapped about 30,000 children from Afghanistan, took them to Russia, educated them, and then sent them back to Afghanistan, to teach in the schools and all the rest of it. So when the Taliban came into power, they realized that, hang on, we want to teach our children Tawheed, but we've got teachers who are atheists and communists, and they're teaching them atheism and communism. So they had to come to a decision. How are we going to solve this problem? We don't have enough teachers, good Muslim teachers, who are going to give them, a good tarbiyah, Islamic tarbiyah, education and stuff. So they made the decision then that, okay, let's prioritize the teaching of boys. We've got enough teachers, either for boys or for girls, but not for both. Yeah. So they decided that, okay, we will have to give girls' education second place and boys' education, top priority, because they'll be running the country tomorrow. Because so we need
they don't have a staff and all this kind of thing. People, the teachers and everything.
Exactly. So they made that decision. So it's not that they were against the teaching of girls. No, absolutely not. They know. The Prophet ﷺ said, "طلب علم فريدة على مسلم ومسلمة."
Muslim,
It is absolutely compulsory for you to teach, to educate your Muslim boys and girls, men and women. So, they couldn't possibly be against education, but this was the reason why they closed the girls' schools, because they didn't have enough teachers. And they were appealing. I remember one of their sort of foreign ministers, I think, Mullah Zarif, if I remember, he came over to Britain in those days and appealed. And when he was asked this question, why are you closing down girls' schools? He said, look, this is the situation as I've just explained to you. He says, we need good Muslim teachers who can teach our children about Tawheed and not about atheism. So please bring them in and we'll open the schools up, and so we can educate our girls as well.
So therefore, they were not against the education of girls, but because of the circumstances, they prioritized. Therefore, they said the men first have to be educated.
Yeah. And in fact, at that time, during the rule of the Taliban, here's an interesting thing that most people don't know. I used to do a lot of reading up on it, because my own background is from Kabul. My ancestry is from there. So I have a kind of emotional kind of connection with the place. And there were more females, more girls studying medicine in the Afghan universities than there were boys studying medicine.
Oh.
How many people knew that? Very few people. And because of the anti-Taliban propaganda, which was immense. Now the question, and then in December of 2000, I remember, even now I remember it. I read an article in one of the Islamic magazines. I don't know if you remember Impact.
Yeah.
Impact magazine,
Yeah.
Excellent magazine, very, very good. And it said in there that, it was December 2000. And now the Americans had just spent over $800 million, $800 million trying to wipe out poppy production in Afghanistan, because this was their main crop from which, the farmers would be getting their money. Yeah. And so they'd spent 800 million to wipe this basically drug out, and they failed completely because it was too lucrative for the farmers. And they, anything else they grew just didn't give them enough money to survive. So in December of 2000, the ulama in Afghanistan got together. And because, the people were saying, come on, you guys, this is supposed to be Sharia government, and we're causing so much suffering to the whole world from this poppy production, because obviously it's being turned into opium and to other drugs. And this is causing a huge amount of suffering in the world. Doesn't matter whether it's Muslims or non-Muslims, they're humans. And we're causing a huge amount of suffering because of this poppy production. And so when the ulama council got together, it was unanimously decided that we must stop this production, even though it's going to hurt our farmers. So Mullah Omar, who was the head of the Taliban at the time, and in fact, who started the Taliban movement, he issued a fatwa in December of 2000 saying, from now on, it is haram for you to grow poppies, basically. As the word got round, overnight, you could say, overnight, the farmers burnt their crops. They stopped producing poppy. Why? Because of this one fatwa. When the Americans saw what had happened, they were devastated. Like, what the heck? How could this person have so much power? We've spent $800 million trying to wipe this out, and in one fatwa, the guy wipes it out overnight. That's sort of power that Islam has. The West, it shook the West, it shook the Americans immensely. Now, why is the West so against the Taliban? See, I remember even now, 1996, just as the Taliban
Yeah,
came to power.
when you speak the West, is it NATO?
No, it's America, it's Britain, it's France, it's the major sort of Western countries, okay, who have an interest there, but primarily US and UK, and the others who could sort of jump in as well. So I remember listening to this top UK minister talking on Radio 4 in 1996, just as the Taliban came to power. And he was asked, why is the UK government so against the Taliban? Why don't we just make peace with them and get on with them like we do with other governments? What do we care how they treat their women or how they do this or that? This is their culture. Because that was a propaganda, you see. That was a propaganda. Oh, look how they treat their women. They force them in burqa. Burqa is it's like a niqab, but it's a traditional Afghan dress for women. It's got nothing to do with the Taliban.
It's like we have the mask for COVID now, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But that was just a traditional dress, and nothing to do with the Taliban. Oh, they make them do this, and then women's rights and this, and girls' schools, education and stuff. Anyway, that was a propaganda. But this minister was very honest. And I salute him for his honesty. I don't know if he's still alive or not. I can't remember who it is, but he was a top UK sort of foreign office minister. He said, I'll tell you why we oppose the Taliban. He said, and this is very interesting, something for us Muslims to really think about. He said, let me tell you, in 1979, when the Iranian Revolution took place, we feared that the Iranian Revolution, which is supposed to be an Islamic revolution with the Khomeini, Ayatollahs, and all coming in, the mullahs coming in and replacing the secular Shah. He said, we feared that the other 57 Muslim countries, amongst them, there would be a domino effect. So as Iran falls to, Islam, if you like, then that would have a knock-on effect on all the other Muslim countries. And within a short time, there would be basically an Islamic world united under Sharia, under one Khalifa, if you like. He said, that was our fear. But it didn't happen. Possibly because Iran is a Shia country and the other countries are Sunni countries. And so it had an impact, but not the impact that we feared. Because, of course, in 1989, with the collapse of the Communist Party, I think it was in Romania or Czechoslovakia somewhere, one of the communist bloc, with the fall of them, the other communist parties literally fell one after the other. I'm sure you remember what happened in 1989. October 1989 was the first Communist Party that collapsed, and then it was a domino effect right throughout the communist world. And by I think it was March of 91, communism was dead within a year. Yeah, one after the other, they dropped, and people just got rid of communism. That is, he said, this is what now we fear. Now, he said, and this is in 96, and remember, in just a few years earlier, communism collapsed, okay, with a domino effect. He says, now we fear that because Afghanistan is a Sunni country, if it becomes a successful Sharia government, where people prosper and there is peace and harmony, then quite possibly Afghanistan will become, will trigger the domino effect in the Sunni world. And all these other secular governments in Syria and Iraq and all these other governments will drop one by one, and you'll have an Islamic Sharia, Islamic world under Sharia, basically an Islamic state, okay? He says, that is our fear. That's why we cannot allow the Taliban government to be successful. That is the reality. Because they obviously want, the West to decide on secular liberalism. They want the whole world to be secular liberal. We all know, especially those of us who've studied the fall of the Ottoman Empire, how much the West, Britain, France, etc., put their resources together to destroy the only Islamic empire, the Ottoman Empire. And they succeeded. They destroyed it. And they do not want the rise of another global Muslim empire. And that's why they cannot allow any Islamic government to be successful, because if one Islamic government is successful, it could be the trigger, the domino that knocks down all these corrupt dictatorships that run the Muslim world, because of a massive uprising from all the people saying, that's what we want. We don't want this secular nonsense. Okay? So that's why, and that was one of the reasons why the West had to get rid of the Taliban. And the other reason, of course, there was another reason. Of course, economics plays a huge part.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans had discovered a huge amount of high quality oil in the Caspian Sea. And the only viable route from the Caspian Sea to where the Americans could pick up the oil was through Afghanistan. The other routes were, I think, through Russia and through, I think, Iran and China. So the others were out of the question.
Right.
Afghanistan was the only viable route for this a huge amount of oil from the Caspian. And so you would see Americans inviting the Taliban over to America to basically negotiate the setting up of this pipeline from the Caspian through Afghanistan into the nearest sea, which could be picked up by oil tankers, etc. So now what happened was that bin Laden, he was in close contact with Mullah Omar. He told him that if you allow the Americans this pipeline through Afghanistan, you will lose your sovereignty over Afghanistan. And Bagram Air Base, your main air base, will become an American air base. That the Americans will rule Afghanistan from that air base. You will lose control of Afghanistan. So the Taliban listened to that and rejected the Americans and said, sorry, we're not going to allow this pipeline through Afghanistan. The Americans said, listen, nobody comes between us and our economy. And if you don't allow it, we'll get rid of you and put a government in power that will allow it. And that's exactly what they did. And so 9/11 and everything else was just a smokescreen to give the Americans an excuse for their global geopolitics. So on the one hand, to go into Afghanistan, to replace the government and put a pro-American government in place that would allow the pipeline. And of course, at the same time, get rid of an Islamic Sharia-based government, which they did not want, to be an example for other Sunni Muslim countries. And of course, then they had a bigger plan of going into Iraq and stealing the oil there and destroying Iraq, because Iraq had become too powerful after the Iran-Iraq war, and it was powerful enough to take on Israel. And of course, the security of Israel is a top priority for America. So Iraq had to be destroyed. Its economy had to be destroyed. Its military had to be destroyed. And so you could see America wanting to get 2 or 3 birds with one stone. Okay, that's what the Americans did. They had this big plan, right? How do we get this plan off the ground? How do we need a massive excuse? As they said, we need a Pearl Harbor. I think you're familiar with Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Attack on Pearl Harbor forced the Americans into World War II.
Yes.
The Americans did not want to take any part in World War II. It was a European affair. Americans didn't want to get involved. But when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, then this forced the Americans into World War II. And so they said, basically, we need a second Pearl Harbor, something massive that happens, that forces, that gives us legitimacy to fulfill our goals in the world. And so 9/11 happened, and we can discuss 9/11 when on the 20th anniversary on September 11th in a few weeks' time. But basically, that was the trigger. And so the Americans went in and so got rid of the Taliban. Of course, America is the mightiest military power the world has ever seen. Taliban, yes, they're very brave, but they had no weapons, and these, modern weapons and stuff, and modern armies, highly trained. They were no match. And so Americans, they teamed up with the enemy of the Taliban, who were these nasty, but mostly communist guys, rapists and, whiskey drinkers and all the rest of it, from the Northern Alliance, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, and others from the northern parts.
Because when we look to their ethnic groups, the 42% are Pashtun, 27% Tajik, 9% Hazara, 9% Uzbek, 4% Aymak, Turkmen is about 3%, 2% Baloch, and 4% others. Therefore,
I think typically 70% are typically Pashtun. That's it. That's the kind of more accurate figures. About 70% of Pashtun Pathans. So anyway, so they are the majority basically. So essentially, the Americans went in 2001 in Afghanistan, October of 2001, and took over. And the result, and they thought we're only going to be there for a short time because look, who are the Taliban? These Afghans. The Taliban were mostly most of the people of Afghanistan are illiterate, homemade rifles, running around in slippers and sandals up and down mountains and what have you. No real military training, etc. So that's all. We have a huge amount of military armor and highly experienced, our Marines and our SEALs and all of these top, special operations, special forces, and everybody else. These guys got no chance. We're going to be in Afghanistan for just maybe a few weeks, couple of weeks, wipe it out, control it, and then, off to Iraq for our second part of the plan, destroy the country, take the oil, and neutralize it so it's no longer a threat to Israel. So it didn't quite work out for the Americans because that's exactly what they did. But then they didn't know the history of Afghanistan. The history of Afghanistan is, and they hadn't looked at what happened with the Russians. The Russians had 140,000 troops over 10 years, and they still lost. And these Americans, because of their arrogance and sheer arrogance, they didn't even bother to look at the history and say, these people just don't like giving up. They don't like invaders. And they'll fight.
Nobody likes invaders, yeah.
Yeah, they will fight to the last man. Exactly. Nobody likes invaders, and definitely not the Afghans. And it's always superpowers that attack Afghanistan. And it is the superpowers that get buried in Afghanistan. Hence, it's got this reputation of being the graveyard of superpowers, of empires. And so the Americans, they put, over 10 years or 20 years, they've plowed in over $1 trillion or pounds, and every kind of, special forces that they had, every Marine, all their drone, the most sophisticated drone, the most sophisticated aircraft, the most deadliest of bombs, the latest in machinery, weapons and stuff, and bombs, and all different kinds of bombs, some of which I described to you earlier on. Bombs that create earthquakes, bombs that suck the air out of the air around you to suffocate you to death. I mean, sound bombs, this bomb, every kind of bomb you can possibly imagine. They threw everything at them, even the daisy cutter. The daisy cutter is basically one level below a nuclear bomb. That's what a daisy cutter is. A massive, massive bomb that just wipes everything out over maybe a square mile or whatever it is. Just wipes everything out. That's why it's called a daisy cutter. Daisies, of course, being flowers, it just destroys everything down to that level. And they still failed. You see, subhanAllah, and Allah is there, then, bombs and stuff. Yes, of course, they tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Afghans died, but they didn't give up. They didn't give up. And of course, we can talk about Pakistan and the role the ISI, the Secret Intelligence Agency of Pakistan, played, and why they played that part, and what is the agenda of Pakistan as well, because certainly Pakistan did help the Taliban, and there are very good reasons why they helped them. But, the bottom line is that in spite of all their efforts and the money they plowed in and bribes they gave to win over, people, billions, they spent billions, in spite of, Guantanamo and all the hundreds of people that were taken from Afghanistan, mostly innocent people, nothing to do with the fighting and stuff. And there were no justice, no court appearance, nothing. There are no charges even, just thrown into Guantanamo from Afghanistan. Anyhow, Allah was with them, and they finally kicked the Americans and the UK and basically everybody else out, because their main task was to expel all invaders. They're not like ISIS, they're not like Al Qaeda. They've got a more global sort of project of Khilafah or whatever, yeah. But the Taliban had just one aim: expel all invaders and live in peace in Afghanistan. They don't have any kind of plans to go outside and create a greater Afghanistan or Islamic State, huge. They have no ambitions at all along those lines, unlike your ISIS and Al Qaeda and stuff. And so this is where we are today. That in spite of all their efforts, they realized the Taliban are unbeatable. Why? Because they didn't understand something about the Taliban. The Taliban are not some foreign force like you had the French Foreign Legion or ISIS or Al Qaeda, well, foreigners who come to your land to overtake it. The Taliban are the people of Afghanistan. They are the people of Afghanistan. They were going to go nowhere. Even if they had to fight for 100 years, they were going to go nowhere. This is their land they're fighting for. And the Americans and other invaders, they're not going to be there forever. They're there for a period of time, hoping to completely subdue the population and control it, and then they can go home, putting some leaders in place. And that's not quite how it turned out. And so eventually, with the help of, Pakistan, of course, they didn't give up. And they finally made the Americans realize you cannot beat us no matter what weapons you use. And yeah, you got mighty weapons. And you got all this surveillance and satellites and drones and all this. Yeah, you got all that. But this is our land. And we are going to fight for our land until we kick you out. And today we are experiencing exactly that. The Americans have been kicked out. The Brits have been kicked out in a most humiliating manner. most humiliating manner. But, you know, the Americans leaving the way they have, although they say that is because, okay, you know, we know we can't win, so what's the point? Let's just go. They only spoke to the Taliban. They didn't, the Americans didn't even involve the Afghan government, which is, of course, put in place by the and paid by the Americans. And the question then arises, why have the Americans do that? It's the same sort of question that people ask, you know, what was the exit strategy for the Americans in Iraq? Why didn't they have an exit strategy? You know, and people think that, you know, the Americans failed in what they tried to achieve in Iraq. No, we're not talking about Iraq, but just a little footnote on that. The Americans achieved what they wanted. The Americans went in to destroy Iraq and make it a failed state, so that all its institutions fail and it is unable to basically operate. So it destroyed all institutions, right down to the traffic police. It destroyed everything. So that on the one hand, no one could fight back against the Americans, and the Americans, you know, they took control of the oil, and at the same time they destroyed their army, they destroyed their infrastructure, and so Iraq was no longer a threat to Israel, which was one of the targets, which was one of the main purposes of going into Iraq. Grab the oil and security of Israel. And, you know, in terms of money, well, it used Iraqi money to build Iraq. And who are the contractors? Americans. So they were going to benefit even from the reconstruction. So the Americans didn't have an exit strategy because they didn't really intend to exit.
And do you think that what
happened here?
And
now,
do you think that do you think that the vacuum now, because United States, UK are going out, do you think the scenario of Iran, like it went to Iraq, will happen it will not happen in Afghanistan? You don't think so?
If you, no, hang on. I'll tell you, there's a game going on here as well. The Americans didn't leave just suddenly for no reason. There's a game going on. Look at the American agenda. What is America most concerned about today? It's not concerned about Afghanistan as such. It's not concerned about even Iran as much, or Iraq. The primary area of interest for the United States is China. China is rising and is becoming a competitor, is competing with America for the control of the world, basically. America controls the world. It's Pax Americana. A Pax Americana is total, complete supremacy of the United States on air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace. And America wants to keep it that way. There's only one nation on the planet that is threatening this Pax Americana, and that is China. And there are 400 US bases surrounding China.
Is it just China, not Russia as well?
Russia economically is unviable. The only thing about Russia, what has Russia got? It's got weapons, it's got lots of gas, and it's got oil. Yeah, it doesn't produce anything else. This is, you know, that's all it's got, Russia. Economically, Russia is not strong at all. Yes, it's got about over 7,000 nuclear bombs, and it's got a, you know, still got a military and everything else. So militarily, Russia is still pretty strong. Economically, Russia is very weak. So yes, it is a threat, but not the threat that China is, because very soon China is going to be the world's number one economy as well, beating America. So, and of course, as the economy grows, China will be spending much, much more on its military as well. So at the moment, it's only spending about 200 billion, whereas of course, America's spending is about 600-700 billion. But
because you know that we heard that during all the negotiation, Taliban was going to China and Russia and talking to them
exactly.
as well.
And the reason for that is this: the Russians, when they were in Afghanistan from 79 to 89, they discovered a huge amount of natural resources, and especially rare earth elements, which are used in modern technology, like your mobile phones and everything else, and electric batteries and all the rest of it. And we're talking about $1 to $2 trillion of natural resources. Okay, that's a lot. And so that's why the Russians did not want to leave. But when they did leave, the Americans discovered all the paperwork and all the research that they'd done. And they thought, right, we're staying here because we're going to be taking the gas and the possibly oil, but also cobalt and the various other, natural resources that they've got. So, of course, now that the Americans have gone, now the Chinese don't want a bad relationship with Afghanistan. And they've got the Silk Road and all that in mind. And they've got their, of course, economy is still growing.
And you know about
China, rare earth elements.
Yes, and China is not actually bothered about the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, the tendency by Islam.
There's only one thing that China is concerned about, and that is if the Taliban end up going into Xinjiang and helping the Uyghurs. That is the only thing that bothers China from Afghanistan, nothing else. And no doubt, there will be an agreement between the Chinese and the Taliban that you won't be sending fighters into Xinjiang to help the Uyghur Muslims. And in return, of course, China is going to help build Afghanistan, and it'll be taking all those natural resources in the process as well. But, so this is the deal that's going on between China and Afghanistan. But here's the thing. We talked about, what America did in Iraq and why it did it. Now here, why did America just leave without any real negotiated settlement? Just left as it left Saigon in Vietnam, literally overnight, and left the chaos there. Because the Americans are hoping that there will be chaos in Afghanistan, that there will be a civil war, and it will really mess up the situation in Afghanistan. And as the situation in Afghanistan becomes really messy and civil war, as it happened before when the Russians left, this will spill over. There are more Pashtun Pathans in Pakistan than there are even in Afghanistan. You know that?
All right.
Yeah. There are more Pashtun because, it was all one region. And when the British went in and they drew the Durant line, they split up tribes, huge Kabilas. And half the Kabila ended up in Afghanistan and half the Kabila ended up in Pakistan. So you've got a huge number of Pashtun Pathans, massively, we're talking about 20, 30, 40 million at least, yeah, in that sort of border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And that's why there is, this is one of the reasons why the Americans could not defeat the Taliban, because Taliban are Pashtun Pathans, most of them. And they were just going over the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan very, very easily because their families were there. So whenever they wanted to escape the Americans or whatever, they just went over the border into Pakistan, okay, to their families or their other Kabilas. And the Kabila system is very, very strong there. They defend members of their Kabilas. And so because of that, that was one of the reasons why it was just impossible for the Americans to defeat the Taliban, because of this very, very open border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The other thing is, of course, that they are hoping, the Americans are hoping that Pakistan is going to get sucked into this war as well, because you've got Pashtun Pathans in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. Okay, I mean, for example, my own family are Pashtun Pathans from that border area. Okay, which is literally about 40, 50 miles from the border of Afghanistan. So you have a hope. The Americans are hoping that the situation will become very messy, and this will create a problem for the Silk Road and problems between Pakistan and China, because the ultimate aim is to get China. And if we can create chaos within Pakistan and chaos within Afghanistan, then that creates a problem for China. So that's the bigger plan. But what has so far happened is that civil war doesn't seem to be happening. And the Americans are going to do their best to try and create that civil war in Afghanistan. But the Taliban have managed to have peace agreements with the enemies. And even in those areas, which from 96 to 2001, which they didn't control, the northern territories, which are part of the Northern Alliance, they managed to control every part, every crossing between every country that is bordering Afghanistan. And so the possibility of civil war is now diminished, seriously diminished. And now, you see, now this was always in the interest of Pakistan. Now we come to Pakistan now. Okay, so this is the situation there with the Americans.
And because I think I am just reading the actual agreement that the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, the United States recognize that Al-Qaeda, ISIS, K, and other international groups, and they will continue to use Afghan soil to recruit members, raise funds, train adherents. Therefore, they want to stop them to become a base for terrorism against the United States and its allies and their interests as well. Therefore, they want actually to make sure that the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan will make sure that their
but we know that this is
a base.
We know that this is mostly nonsense, because 9/11 was not done. We know there's so much circumstantial evidence that those buildings did not come down purely because of those planes going in. There's too much.
We spoke about it we've done this. Yeah.
And so to say that Afghanistan was responsible for what happened in 9/11, that's just a smokescreen. It is an absolute smokescreen. There was not one single Afghan was involved in 9/11. Even those 11 or so people, mostly there were Saudis and one or two Lebanese and what have you. There was not a single Afghan. So why was Afghanistan bombed? Why was it attacked? Why were the Americans there for 20 years? It's all nonsense. And so, yes, the ISIS are there in Afghanistan, but the Taliban don't like ISIS. They are enemies with them. They will try to obviously have a peace agreement with them, definitely, because they don't want to, look, the Afghans for 40 years, they've been fighting non-stop. For 40 years.
They were sick and tired of this war.
They're sick and tired of war.
As you said, when you look to the number of people, casualties, about 51,000 from Taliban and from the
there's far more than that. Far more than that.
And most of them, majority of these wars, there is a majority will be civilians and casualties. Definitely. Yes, and then the American lost about 7,000 or so, and about I don't know how many trillions.
That's the official figure. These are official figures.
Yes.
Because the Americans, see, these may be official US soldiers, but they had lots and lots of mercenaries, contractors and stuff. They're not counted amongst these 7,000. The Americans lost far more than this number. Because, as I said, there were many, many contractors, soldiers who were working for private companies like Blackwater and others. And those numbers are not counted amongst these. Remember, and there were many, many thousands upon thousands of Mexicans and other Latinos and others who wanted US citizenship. And they were told, okay, spend, I don't know, 6 months in Afghanistan or Iraq, and we will give you US citizenship. And of course, they didn't return. They died there.
And of course, now, I just want to put in brackets those people who have been working with the American translators, some who worked with the American to help them around and all these kind of things. Now they are asking to flee Afghanistan because of what they have. Do you think that in this kind of conflict, those people who have been working or helping or as a translators or within the actual United States Army and everything, do you think that they should be subjected to this threat of, if they are caught, they can be, something can be very bad done to them?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously they are going to be seen as ghaddar, as traitors. Yeah, it's obvious they are working for the enemy. Now, obviously the wisest thing would be for the Taliban to look at every single case individually. If they have that expertise, if they have that setup, if they have that time, and look at and see what, can we use this person? Because these are, obviously educated people, and there aren't that many educated people in Afghanistan. Is this person likely to turn against us or work against us? Is he a munafiq? Is he an imposter? He's going to pretend to be on our side but work against us. Or was this person just working for the money to keep his family alive? In which case, well, we're going to be paying him now, so he'll be working for us, so there is no danger from him. That's the decision that they're going to have to come to on an individual basis.
And the other thing is about, the United States, if the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, they are a sovereign country and they want to have a relationship with China in whatever they have decided to. Do you think is it appropriate that US interfere?
America will always interfere. America sees itself as, well, it is the only superpower, and it has huge resources even now, even though America is now on the decline. America has the defeat of America in Afghanistan is a sign of the decline of America as a world power. This is one of the signs. Even after the longest war in its history, 20 years, it got booted out, humiliated. Absolutely. By whom? Not a first world army. It wasn't Britain. It wasn't Australia. It wasn't Canada. It wasn't Russia. It wasn't China. It was one of the poorest countries in the entire world, with almost no funding from outside, self-funded, mostly illiterate men in sandals, no uniforms, no nothing. This is utter humiliation. And the Americans are not going to just say, okay, never mind, we tried and we failed. No, they're not going to leave Afghanistan, because Afghanistan is too close to Pakistan, which is too close to China. And then, and the Americans do not want this Silk Road to be successful, because that will only boost the Chinese economy even more. So the Americans are going to do their best to destroy the trade links between China and Pakistan and Pakistan and Afghanistan. So interference, you can expect it. Definitely there will be interference. And they will definitely try to get into power someone that they like. So this is a game that's going to go on until America collapses as a world power, which may be in the next few years, possibly, as economically, with all this COVID and everything else has happened, and America has been on a decline anyway for many years.
And you don't anticipate that Afghanistan becomes a place where maybe the conflict between China and United States?
Yeah, I mean, China. Look, Afghanistan has two reasons for it being so attractive. Number one, strategically, is very, very important where it is. Very, very important. And number two, it's got enormous natural resources. So it's not a country that anyone is going to leave to a bunch of illiterate men, basically. Coming to Pakistan now. What is Pakistan's agenda? Pakistan's agenda regarding Afghanistan. Pakistan, without a doubt, has been, a part of the intelligence service in Pakistan is that it has, of course, got many people who are Pashtun Pathans and who got loyalties there with the Pashtuns in Afghanistan. And so they have been helping them, but there is a reason why. You see, Pakistan knows it could go to war with India anytime. That's just the way the India-Pakistan relations are. India is still very angry that Pakistan broke away, and Hindustan or Bharat or the subcontinent got cut up, and it still wants to rejoin Pakistan with India. India is not going to give up on that. Okay, and we can talk about why the split happened, because yesterday was Pakistan's Independence Day, and we can say a few words on that. But Pakistan knows if it goes to war with India, and already has done, is it 2 or 3 times now, and it's come very, very close to war just a few years ago, not long ago at all. Now, both of them are nuclear powers, and if there's any mistake on one side, that's it. Not just India and Pakistan will get destroyed. Pakistan's got about 200 nuclear bombs. India's got about 150, 160 nuclear bombs. So Pakistan has actually got more nuclear bombs than India, apparently, from what I understand. And I mean, Israel has got about, I think, 150 to 200 as well. So if they go to war, and Imran Khan has made it absolutely clear, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, that it could end up being nuclear, and if it's a nuclear war, both countries will be destroyed, and in fact, the consequences will be for the whole world. Imagine, 600 nuclear bombs, or 300 to 350 nuclear bombs going off. I mean, you can imagine the consequences for the whole world. Now, if there is a conventional, let's just put the nuclear war aside. If there is a war between India and Pakistan, now, India is about 7 times the size of Pakistan. Yeah, that's, Pakistan is tiny. Pakistan's got a population of 220 million. India's got a population of almost 1.4 billion now. So you can see, it's no comparison.
And Afghanistan about 42 million or something.
Yeah, about 30 to 40 million, something like that. Yeah, I don't have the figures. But anyway, Pakistan needs a buffer so that if India attacks, Pakistan needs a friendly government in place. Where? In Afghanistan, because that's where, the Pakistan people, there's mass sort of refugees, etc., as a result of India's attack. That's where they're going to go. So they don't want a closed border. And that will only happen if you have a friendly government in power. And the only friendly government that could be is with the Taliban. The American installed government was never going to be a friendly government with Pakistan, because they'll be getting their instructions from America.
And do you think that, okay, Pakistan is there, the role of Turkey, because they have done...
We'll come to that in a moment. I'll mention Turkey in a moment. So Pakistan needs a friendly government in place in Afghanistan. And because they had a good relationship with the Taliban, and remember now, in the last couple of years, you've got Imran Khan, who himself a reason. He's a Pashtun Pathan himself. You see, he's from Peshawar, and people of Peshawar are Pashtun Pathans. They're literally just a few miles from the border of Afghanistan.
Mm.
So he also has close links with the Taliban, and made friendly sort of relations with the Taliban. So and of course, it's always been Pakistan's policy to have a friendly neighbors there, and so that's why the ISI in Pakistan, the intelligence agency, has been supporting the Taliban against, of course, the wishes of the Americans. Americans have always known that Pakistan is, on the one hand, trying to be friendly with America, but on the other hand, is being friendly with the Taliban and helping them as well. So Pakistan has had a very difficult sort of relationship in that area, and it has lost, according to Imran anyway, about 70,000 of its soldiers and civilians because it was basically being a poodle to America. Whatever America was saying, previous Pakistani governments have been saying yes, 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 just to get their 1.6 billion award for being puppets of America. Imran Khan has put an end to that and said, I don't want your money anymore. Thank you very much. Okay, and I'm not going to be a puppet of America anymore. So Imran Khan has made that crystal clear. So, so now he's in a much stronger position when it comes to America. But the problem, of course, now is that he's very, very close to China. And because of that very close economic relationship and military relationship, because Pakistan and China have just built their own, joint fighter aircraft as well. So, Pakistan has been advancing quite a bit. And, being the only Muslim nuclear power in the world as well. So it's always been in Pakistan's interest to have a Taliban government. And now Pakistan has got it. And so that part of Pakistan's foreign policy has been very successful. Coming to Turkey's role. Now, I know that Turkey and the Taliban, Erdogan and Taliban, they have good relations with each other because it's a Muslim country, and the Taliban want good relations with all the Muslim countries. And so I can see now, once NATO has officially left, and the Taliban spokesman was saying only the other day when he was asked about Turkey, he says, yes, Turkey was supposed to take over the main airport in Kabul.
Mm-hmm.
And the spokesman said very clearly, look, Turkey is, our Muslim brother, and we want good relations with Turkey. However, Turkey is here as part of NATO, and we want all NATO troops off our land. We want them out of our country. There's no negotiation while there's a single NATO troop in our land. So until Turkey officially leaves as part of NATO, then after that, Turkey can come as a representative, not of NATO, but as Turkey, a Muslim country. Then we will have good relations, and we will have trade, and we will talk, etc.
So therefore, you are talking about, because you have running out of time now, the transition now. I think the transition of government now, transition period. And do you think that they will stay with the same constitution? Therefore, they have to elect a president. They have 2 vice presidents. Then they have the actual National Assembly. They have the like upper house and the lower house as well, and everything. And do you think that this will be, because sometimes because of the composition of the actual Afghanistan, do you think they will go by the vote? Do you go by the vote, or do you think that they will do it by proportional representation?
That remains to be seen, what sort of political setup they have. But certainly they will have departments. And I was just listening to one of their spokesmen. He said, look, Because remember, for 6 years, from 96, well, 5 years, 96 to 2001, they had a functioning government. And so they have experience of the Department of Agriculture, Department of, Defense Department, Health Department, etc. Yeah, they have experience of that. So they're not complete, they're not just a military force. They've had experience of that. And I'm pretty sure that they will be inviting experts from Pakistan, from Turkey, from other sort of Muslim countries who are able to give them advice on how to set up a modern, functioning Islamic government based on Sharia. So what the end result will be, Allah knows, but we can assume that there'll be some kind of Shura council, okay? We can assume that there will be some kind, there'll be different departments and stuff. We can assume there will be an official army, okay? And trade with other countries and all the rest of it. We can assume that they will be, they will have good relations with China, which will help them to use dig up their natural resources and use them for the benefit of Afghanistan. So we can assume all of these things because, we expect, that is how you run a government. The technicalities, if they don't have the technical skills, then Turkey and Pakistan, maybe Indonesia, maybe Malaysia, who knows, maybe, I don't know, Saudi and other countries, whoever wants to get involved, will come and, give them their advice and their technical, maybe expertise.
And, in their part 3 of the agreement, they say the United States will request the recognition and endorsement of the United Nations Security Council for this agreement-related arrangement. 2, the United States and the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan are committed to continue positive relations, including economic cooperation for reconstruction. I underline reconstruction. The United States will refrain from the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of Afghanistan or intervening in its domestic affairs. And the United States will continue to work to build regional and international consensus to support the ongoing effort to achieve a political settlement to the principal conflict in Afghanistan. Now, if I take them
all of these, forget all this. These are words. These are just words.
That we wait for action.
The reality on the ground is going to be according to their agendas. Okay, this is diplomatic talk. We will do this and that, and we'll have good relations, and we will not interfere and stuff. Of course, America is going to interfere in the internal affairs of Afghanistan, as it interferes in the internal affairs of pretty much every country in the world. Okay, whether it's through Facebook or whether it's through Instagram or Twitter or whatever.
But I just ask you now, do you think the scenario which happened to Egypt will happen to Afghanistan again?
And the Americans have really been beaten up badly. The Americans weren't beaten up badly in Egypt. Egypt's situation was very, very different. You had a Morsi government that very reluctantly came to power, okay, only because there was nobody else there apart from the army who had any kind of organizational ability. It was only the Ikhwan who were organized and the army that was organized. And there was no basis for any other political party at all in Egypt because Mubarak didn't allow any other political party to survive. So the only organized elements were Ikhwan and the military. And so the military very tentatively, very reluctantly, unhappily, they said, okay, fine, let them go into power because obviously people have voted for them. But of course, the military is mostly secular. And they were, and the who else was, the media is mostly secular. Okay, they were not in the hands of Morsi. And the theater directors and the filmmakers and stuff who were able to influence through their own mediums were secular. Then the Christians there, that 10% Copts who are very influential also in Egypt, were also very much against the Ikhwan. And so you have the whole system totally anti-Ikhwan. And of course, the Americans were definitely 100% Ikhwan, against Ikhwan, and the Israelis were 100% against Ikhwan. So when you have every institution that there is there completely against you, what chance do you have? You have little chance for survival. So that's a completely different situation. Here, you've had this freedom movement, resistance movement, yeah, that has that was in power for 6 years, yes, and 5 years, and it was forced out, and then it fought back, and it beat up badly, absolutely humiliated the only superpower in the world, after it had humiliated another superpower in the world, which is the Russians. So now the only two superpowers that there were have been so badly beaten up that they're saying, you know what, we don't want to mess with these guys. We know what they're capable of, and they really beat us up badly, and they humiliated us on the world stage, and we don't want another beating from them.
Right. I want to finalize maybe this discussion. What the idea is about UK role. What will be?
Look, again, the agenda, always ask yourself, what is the agenda? The British will, they still haven't forgotten the British Empire. And it's still in their blood. It's only been about, 70 or so years since the sort of end of the British role in Pakistan. I think 74 years to be precise. That they ended their role in the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and what have you. And so what the British always do is, okay, the Americans are the superpower. They're the ones who are calling the shots. We'll just latch on to the Americans. And, we've still got, plenty of skills in terms of our diplomacy and what have you, because we ruled the world for so long. And the institutions are still there and they're still very strong. So they latch on to the Americans in the hope that they would get a taste of that empire position again. They are still powerful on the world stage, because without the Americans, the British are nothing, absolutely nothing at all. So they latch on to the Americans saying yes, yes to everything in order to have that sort of feel of we're still a world power and we can still influence world events. So whatever the Americans do, the British will be behind them and egging them on and pushing them in one direction or another.
Okay, but therefore, what we have just now, this is just to wait and see how things will go, and therefore, United States will keep up their promises, and with United Kingdom as well, and because what happens sometimes is what has happened in Libya as well, when the institutions, is very, very important. The national army has to be maintained, the military institution and the whole foundation of the government, to have a good governance of the government, to have the election of the president, the election of the assembly, National Assembly, the lower and the upper house as well, and of course the local elections and everything. And the Constitution is a document in which should be discussed, because we talk about let's say the British values about respecting democracy, between brackets, a free vote, one person, one vote. 2, the individual freedoms, respect of the rule of the law, tolerance as well.
What you expect in Afghanistan?
Yes, I think that those values of the actual to run a country according to this.
You need to understand something. These people are very traditional people. And if you look at the 57 Muslim countries, each one has their own version of Islam operating in those countries. So it's Islam is basic values mixed in with the culture of the country. Yeah, that's what you have in every single Muslim country. 57 Muslim countries, you have 57 different versions of their practice of the deen. Afghanistan is no different. They talk about Sharia, but it'll be an Afghan-styled Sharia. It'll be compatible with their customs, with their traditions, etc. It's not going to be pure Quran and Sunnah. I mean, you can forget that. Okay, it's going to be their own interpretation based on their culture and their understanding of the deen from their own scholars and their teachers and what have you.
Because most of the West will discuss about, you know, the stoning and the cutting of the hands or the thief and all.
This is it. And the first time that they will end up stoning an adulterer or adulteress, it will be filmed. It may be one event, you know, in the whole year. But that one event they will use to say, look at these barbarians, etc. You understand? Look at these barbarians. And they will use every means at their disposal to demonize Afghanistan. They will say, you know, they're against the teacher educating their daughters, against girls, which I've already explained to you is complete nonsense. It's about the availability of teachers.
And do you think that they will let them go? They let them actually run their own affairs without interference, but they will try to do so.
No, look, the West is never going to leave Afghanistan alone because of the reasons I've already told you. Strategic position, natural resources, close to China, disrupting the Silk Road, disrupting China's economy. They will not openly invade for a very long time.
And do you think that the support of Turkey can be good for them?
Once Turkey leaves as part of NATO and then returns as a Muslim country, fellow Muslim country, I think the Turks are going to give them maximum help in, you see, you were talking about reconstruction with the Americans, like that. Yes. I think Turkey is going to, and possibly Pakistan as well, in a major way, they will help the reconstruction of Afghanistan. More than likely, it'll be a tendering process, yeah? And the Turks are going to beat the Americans in any tendering. As they are doing now, they are beating the French in Africa. One of the reasons why Macron does not like Erdogan is because Erdogan is now working with and helping former French colonies that the French still have a lot of influence over, because France regards most of Africa as French, okay? And the Turks are going in, they're building big projects in Africa, etc., and is pushing France out. And the French don't like it. And so, you know, the same thing is going to happen, maybe to a large extent, to some extent anyway, in Afghanistan. The Americans are going to want to, you know, rebuild Afghanistan, but the Turks are going to be in there big time with their construction companies as well, and possibly even the Saudis with the Bin Laden sort of construction company and the various other big construction companies.
All right. Therefore, I think we hope all the best for the Afghan as well, Islamic Republic of Afghan.
And they live in harmony, yes.
And I hope they have learned their lessons from the past, and they should look to the past, learn from it, and build their future as well. And cooperation. I think even when you talk about oil and gas and natural resources, the Afghan will not eat it or drink it. They will have to sell it to get some money, and then to rebuild their own house as well and put their house in order. But I hope they will give them the time to sort their affairs and sort their differences. And for sure, I think they can do their best with the help of those like Turkey as well, and the Islamic they call it now the Islamic Cooperation Council now, or this economic like between the IOC. It used to be the Islamic Congress, and I believe that they can help the 53 Muslim states can help
57.
Afghanistan.
Yeah, 57 Muslim
57 countries can help as well. Okay, Jazakumullah khair. I hope you recover very well as well. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for your contribution. And with this, inshallah, we thank you for all. You can always, if you have any questions, all questions are right as well. There is just bad answers. And you can do us this by sending it at radiohajj.online as well, admin@radiohajj.online. And this is, with that we finish as well. And جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.